This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine. Hello, Mary. Today is a little bit of a different Moxie Mondano, isn't it?
Peace be with you, Thorin.
And with you.
Today's guest is a peace builder.
Yes. What is that? What does that mean?
Well, she is going to tell us what it means. Her name is Lisa Worth Huber.
Mm-hmm.
We're both lecturers at Western Connecticut State University, but Lisa's work goes far beyond the classroom. She's currently the president of the National Peace Academy.
Wow.
And she's on the board of the Global Peace Education Network. She is a facilitator, a storyteller, a poet, a painter, a lovely human being, and she's just done so much around this issue that I'm so excited to hear what she has to say. And her full resume is available on the show notes if people want to delve deep. But suffice it to say, she's an interesting person.
I would think so.
So I want to just get right to her and hear what she has to say.
Sounds terrific.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Main Street Moxie. We're really glad to have you.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really honored that you asked me to join you.
Well, we're honored that you said yes, and we're going to get right to our first question, which is, how do you define the word Moxie?
First of all, I love the question. And yes, I wanted to go and check it out, see what the definition was. And then I started getting into the weeds before doing that of just the language.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, I'm just going to pause. And as I did that, what was really fun was I felt like all of a sudden I was in the middle of like a film.
Mm-hmm.
And in the film, there's the character. And the character is in this challenging situation. And so this is what Moxie is to me. It's when you're in a challenging situation and you don't know what to do. And then all of a sudden you have a vision, an idea, a dream, and of how you could transform what's going on, what this could possibly be. And so what you do then is you pull up your sleeves, you put on your Moxie cat cape and get to it, and Moxie is when you just commit and you say, I'm in, I'm going to take this on.
That sounds really relevant.
Yes.
And I like the picture that you painted since you're an artist. And I want to ask you, so how have you been the star of that movie in your own life?
Oh, what an interesting question. I don't feel like I'm the star. I feel like I am inspired by many different stars who I put in that position.
Mm.
And as I was thinking this, when it came through, it was actually a teen. So it was Greta Thunberg. And there I saw her, there when she first started protesting for the environment, there in Sweden, out in front of the Capitol, being willing to speak up, somebody who identifies on the spectrum and talks about that. And yet she chose to speak. She put that cape on. So she's one of the people I think who really shows Moxie. And then I think so many of the charismatic, iconic leaders in areas of peace and social justice, those people all to me are just, show Moxie. And so I just try to do my best to be as much like that as I can.
When you say be like that, what is that?
Well, that is when you are stepping into that position of being a peaceful, nonviolent person who's trying to make a difference in whatever the situation might be. And so you step in by first being conscious of what's going on. The Moxie, the way I saw it is you see that there's this conflict. There's
Right.
something that really is needs to be addressed. People are dying. People are starving. People are, the suicide ideation is going up, anxieties through the roof, whatever the situation might be. And it can be close to home. It can be in your very home. It can be in your community, your school, and it can be in the country, or it can be in the world. But you see this and you say, I want to take this on, but I need to put on, when you put that cape on, you take on those particular qualities. In Kingian nonviolence, we go through trainings where you learn first, that the first thing you learn is that nonviolence is a way for courageous people. You step into what that courage means. And courage is when you activate the heart for the good of the whole. The heart is part of the very etymology of the word.
Right.
So that's, one of the things that you do. And you remember too in King and Nonviolence that the beloved community is the framework for the future. So you're not taking people and trying to demean them. Their actions, yes. The person, no. And you're trying to build a beloved community. And for that to occur, all people have to be part of it. So we have to find a way to bridge our differences, to be able to come to a table and talk to each other, to not fear for our lives or our safety. And that takes enormous work. And look what we're living through right now. And it always brings me, as I was thinking about talking with you, it brings me to the thought too, do we ever get past having to do the work? Do we sort of ever get to this place where we're on this isle of peace and there we all are living? I think we have moments like that, but nothing ever stays the same.
How does one get into what you're describing, you see in your community, in your home? I wouldn't even know where to start to make an impact or have any, where would one start to help, put more peace forward, except just like in my heart, I feel at peace and, I try to respect everyone and, what you put out, you get back. But how would one go further?
Well, Lauren, what you just said is the very way you start.
Mm-hmm.
It starts, and this is repeated all the time in this work. Remember, everybody, that peace starts within you first.
Right.
So if you're not feeling it, if it's not there, then it's not the moment for you to come forward.
Right.
And in a lot, before protests or anything like that, we check ourselves.
Right.
Can we be peaceful in this situation? Can we not react in an angry and violent way? And if we are feeling so charged that we might, then we excuse ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We say, not this time,
Right.
I'll help in another way. I'll bring you all waters or, whatever. And then the next part, really, what do you do next? Again, that is, and this is where it becomes really almost like it becomes a creative process, because each situation is different.
Right. Right.
So what we would do in a trauma situation, let's say you're dealing with something that someone is in a very traumatic experience, and you sense that you are peaceful within, so you can address this. The first thing that we do is we say stop. So you stop yourself, you breathe, you think about what the situation is.
Right.
And then from there, you reach out and you start to have an exchange.
Okay.
But at that point, you've engaged your body, you've engaged your mind, you've engaged your heart, your gut, so that you're all there feeling out what's happening. And that also provides an ability to really be very in tune with the other person.
Okay.
Because we all know in the work that we all do and in our lives that, when we see anger or we see violence or frustration, it's coming from something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And then part of our job is, can we gently, in a way, be able to find a way to that thread so that we can work with that thread versus the external violence.
But doesn't there have to be a reciprocity? I mean, if you want to bridge a difference with someone and they don't want to bridge, or, but I guess in peace work, not everyone is bridging differences the same as building peace? Because it seems like in peace work, you might not be guaranteed that reciprocity, but you still have to do the work anyway. Whereas if I'm bridging a difference with someone across from me, I really can only bridge it if they're willing to build a bridge with me.
Right.
Or am I getting lost in a logical puzzle?
You see, and what you're bringing forward, which is very important, is that all these situations are different. So when you're working to bridge something, that does mean that you are with a group of people who are willing to come together to, dialogue about this, address it, go through whatever the methodology might be, if it's a restorative justice practice, if it's, a Kingian nonviolence. There's so many different, forms of looking at this and working through it. And if the person's not willing, that's when you notice the trauma and you stop, you breathe, you think, and you decide in that moment, what is it that I'm going to do? And it simply might be just to say, are you okay? Can I do something? What's wrong? And often they explode and you discover, the thing that's really eating at them, that they are dealing with, that's keeping them from being able to meet you at that place that you were describing, Mary, where they're there and they want to try to bridge the difference. They're not there yet. So we have to go through activities to bring that forward. And like that would be, some of the work when I'm working, in a prison or, in a safe house or places where the trauma is the first situation. I'm not there first to build the bridge. I'm there first to find the story. It's like Maya Angelou so brilliantly said that there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. And so that's what we often see when somebody is not willing to sit with us. So to me, that's when I'm not going to do the specific piece work. Let's do the story work.
How does one get into, what's your background? How did you get into this form of work?
Oh, that's such an interesting question.
Because I've never met anyone in your world, if you will. So I was just like, I said to Mary, first thing I have to ask, what's the background? What's the road and pathway? What are the steps to get to here?
Well, it started when I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a home divided.
Okay.
And by that, also I just had I was the only Democrat when it came time to register to vote, the only Democrat in a Republican household.
Mm-hmm.
My father went to the Naval Academy and was a first lieutenant in the Navy before he then became a scientist and did other stuff. So, I was always, on the edge. But I remember being with a group of friends, probably, it was elementary school. It was probably 4th or 5th grade. And it was winter and we were all sledding. And it's mostly a group of guys. And everyone said, so if you could win a lifetime award, what would it be? Would you want to be an Olympic skier? Would you want to be, all this stuff? And they're all going through, I want to be an NFL champion. I want to be an Olympic, pole vaulter. I want to be, I want to win an Academy Award for, or whatever. And it was really strange, but I had just been reading about Gandhi.
I see where this is going.
I said a Nobel Peace Prize would be really cool. So as a little kid, it was like, wow, well, what does that then I had to ask myself again and again and again, well, what does that mean?
Right.
And so I didn't go the direct route. I didn't go into, policy or, into those particular areas. I went into the arts and I tried to bring aspects of story to address injustice.
Okay.
That slowly led me through that, then through, a master's in oral traditions where it was working on healing and healing trauma, and then realizing that we really needed more work like that in the peace field, and then getting my doctorate in peace and conflict transformation, because I didn't want to just resolve it. I wanted to transform it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where the creative arts come in, right?
Right.
Because you need a vision.
Yes.
See, my answer to that question would be inventing a bubble gum that never loses its flavor. And you're going for a peace prize. Thorne and I were both interested in what you just said about the transformation involving the creative process and the storytelling, the use of art, the use of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Can you unpack that a little more about how the arts help transform?
Absolutely. And I think it certainly was transforming for me. So it started again in the same way that you were asking Thorne about bringing peace out there. It starts
Right.
within. So for me, how did I learn about this? I started to learn about it in theater. Was the first. It was my undergraduate degree, and I did that for many years and worked in regional theater throughout the country, and then was part of a theater company in Brooklyn. And when we started to do that, it was really about bringing the voices forward that people had not really been paying attention to. So.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really about elevating those stories and those voices. And then there was Paula Vogel, who actually won a Pulitzer for one of her plays. She was one of the playwrights at the Brooklyn Theater. It was called Moving Target Theater Company then. And she had worked, this is before she had gone to Broadway, and she had done a retelling of Othello. So it was called Desdemona. So Desdemona has this very small role. You sort of only see her a little bit on the stage. And so she then wrote Desdemona, which was that whole storyline that was backstage. What was her marriage like? How was she feeling about things? What was her voice? Bringing that female voice that had been, really repressed forward. So it was doing things like that started to really excite me, and realizing that so many people had that, that ability. And then, going back to the idea of the Moxie with the cape, working with middle schoolers and doing comic books and graphic novels, bringing that story forward, they would create superheroes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So who would be their superhero, and what were they trying to save on the planet? So all of a sudden they started to think about how they could make a difference. And then poetry sort of digs into the wound. So that's working with a lot of people, telling something, as Emily Dickinson says, tell the story, but tell it slant. That's what poetry does. So it's taking that wound, and it's, how do I tell this in a different way that will move somebody else? So it's not me just saying, like I would in a therapy session, I experienced this horrific situation. Instead, how about if I metaphorically talk about the poor little possum that got attacked by an owl?
The stories are meant to be a vehicle for bringing whatever it is, whatever it's about, up to the surface, and conveying them in a way that builds empathy for the teller, or tries to kind of more of a cathartic activity, or both, or none?
I think it might be and again, it depends on, each situation, each story is different. Each has, and sometimes you don't even know why you're telling it until after you start to share it, and then you see the effect it has.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, yes, often to build empathy. And, I sort of, in my piecework, it's sort of like, it's a 3-tier thing. There's sympathy when you feel sorry for, there's empathy when you feel with, and then there's compassion when you're willing to suffer with, you're willing to step into the actual, the pain. And so people will come to these stories in different ways. And I'm sure you've all experienced this, right? You've read a story when you were a teenager and you loved it. And you said, later in your life, I want to read that again. Or your kid is starting to read it and you think, oh, let's read that together. And then you, through your life experience, you have a different perspective. It touches you in a way that it never did when you were young.
Right.
Because your worldview, your circumference has grown so much.
Right. I never thought of it that way. But I'm reading now stories with my kids and it's like, oh, that's not how I remember exactly. Or a line in there, I'm like, oh, that's different. I have a better understanding of that now. One of the things I noticed from your definition of Moxie to what you're talking about with the arts and even poetry is it seems like a lot of this work is a connection to your inner thoughts, feelings, and soul. It reminds me a bit of meditation, positive mindset, these types of things. Is there a direct connection to some of that mentality?
Absolutely. A lot of my work is about peace education.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're doing that educational piece, whether you're doing it with young children or you're doing it with veterans who have PTSD,
Right.
So meditation is often how we begin.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So it's just a way to kind of center.
It centers it, and it provides you, it gets you in the moment, it aligns you with your breath, hopefully aligns your chakras so that you're feeling that sense of movement. And if you're not, then that's always a knock at the door that something's blocking. There's a dam there. What needs to be addressed? Where do you want to dig a little further? So it provides an opportunity to be paying attention to oneself. And often, whether we're in a place of suffering or challenge, or even we're just kind of grocery shopping,
Mm-hmm.
often are not paying attention to ourselves, right?
Right.
We're external from the self. So it's trying to bring that together and center it.
I want to go back to the stories to get a clearer understanding of what you mean by story. When you say story, do you mean kind of a fictional narrative, or do you mean my autobiography? What happened to me?
Both. Absolutely. And there are so many different genres that I would work with. And when I was teaching the master's program in oral tradition, storytelling, and writing, we would study the different genres. And so each would provide a different approach. But it's the self engaging with whatever situation the writer is choosing to engage with. So it could be a narrative nonfiction, it could be poetry or fiction. It could be that you don't necessarily even want to go there. Instead, you recognize within yourself something that you're challenged with. And so you want to go out and start to do an ethnographic research project to talk with other people who have dealt with that. Let's say you were dealing with some sort of sexual abuse or something like that. So you wanted to talk with people who have had to deal with that. And then once you do that, you are often invited back to do far deeper self-reflection. And often that will lead you to write the memoir, or if that's frightening, to fictionalize it.
So is the story, and maybe it's not an either or, is the story to allow me to self-heal, or to have you understand me better, for me to feel understood by you and therefore connected to you in some way and not so isolated?
Both. In appreciative inquiry, in that process, one of the things that we recognize people, the things that people desperately need, they need to be seen, they need to be heard, they need to be loved, and they need to be forgiven. So within the context of a story, it might tap into one or all, some or all of those. So yes, So in that process, it's both. I need to be heard, I need to be seen, but I also, when you recognize that within yourself, then you also see that everybody else is needing that as well.
So are these stories then more for personal use, if you will, or are they, do you try to get them out to the larger public to pass, to get the message out there more, or is it a mixture of both?
A mixture of both. It really depends. It depends on the community you're working with.
Okay.
It depends on what are the issues that come forward.
Mm-hmm.
In any kind of peace work that you're doing, you're creating a safe place of trust.
Okay.
And part of what that requires is that what occurs there stays there unless the group decides it wants to share.
Okay. So is your work then focused more one-on-one and in smaller groups, or how does your work specifically, what's the outlet for it, if you will?
It's a variety. I mean, it can be a large gathering of people where you're at the podium and you're talking, or you have a group of speakers and you're addressing a certain topic, and people will share some of the stories of the work that they've done. And those will have a far greater impact on a larger group of people because they've been doing that work in a community or, in their country or wherever for a while. And they've started to see, in all these different situations, these things are really working, or these things or these issues continue to come up. We need to really address this in a far deeper way. So it can be very much a one-on-one, much more mine or group, but a group that's more in a room versus people on a stage versus in a large auditorium, although that does happen. That's more when you're sharing the outcome of the work you've done versus actually doing the work in a large group. And it can be a large group. There can be several hundred people, and then they break up into different groups and you move through and work with the different groups. And I mean, there's a really an eclectic way of dealing with it. And again, it goes back to what's the issue,
right?
What's the desire of the group? What needs to be brought forward? And what are the skills that we need to bring into the room to share with everybody so that they can start bringing that into their work or their classroom or their place of work or worship or whatever.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine. Main Street Magazine is a monthly magazine and a website with daily content, and we love to feature people, places, and things that make our community special. To learn more, please visit our website, www.mainstreetmag.com.
If you ask any parent what they want for the holidays, they'd say world peace, right? I mean, that was like the classic answer. What do you think is the most afflictive emotion or source of thwarting peace? Is it economic deprivation? Is it greed? Is it jealousy? What is it that keeps us from getting there?
Oh, that's a really great question. And there's not a direct answer.
Well, there has to be, because this is a podcast and this is what we do. We solve problems, big ones.
You go right ahead. You teach me how to do that. Okay. I know. Living in complexity is sort of where I roll. It depends on the situation, and it depends on the group you're talking to. So that economic disparity that you brought up. So greed and economic disparity sort of work together, don't they? It's that scale that is way out, it's just, it's out of balance.
Right.
So, and it depends on who you're talking to and how they perceive it. And we're in a time right now where it's so hard to talk about so many different things, and people are so angry and frustrated.
Yeah.
And what keeps coming up for me is, we need to really bring civility back, and And when there's incivility, it's my right is, and then you can kind of fill in the blank. My right is, and that's my right. And then, but where's the respect? Where's the dignity? Where's the thought that everybody else has a right too? Do you know what those rights are that matter to them? And so we need to dig deeper into our better selves. We need to activate empathy and compassion. We need to be willing to step out of our comfort zone. We need to notice others that are in need, and we need to do something and decide to act, do something. We can't observe and just stay on social media and talk about it there.
Right.
That's not going to make a change.
So peace is an embodied exercise.
Absolutely.
It's not just a cerebral one.
Exactly. And if that's what you're seeing, and that's, it's when it's being taught, it can't just take place in the classroom. It has to have activity outside within the community. And it doesn't need to be huge. Yes, we want to address this. Like you said, world peace. I want that, may peace prevail on earth. Absolutely. But, I go back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Eleanor Roosevelt crafting that. And I love the way that it ends, where she says, where do human rights begin? In small places close to home, so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. And I think that's what we need to teach our children. It's not about you being recognized. It's not about everybody seeing this work that you're doing. And it's not about that you can necessarily, you might be able to impact the world. You might be able to be, Greta Thunberg and really start to create a world conversation around climate issues. But maybe it's just that you notice that there are homeless people in your neighborhood. And you go home and you say, hey, we've got to do something about this. So you start to work at the soup kitchen, or you start to do certain things. And that's building peace.
So it's kind of the opposite of social media in the fact that it's not about me, me, me. It's doing something for others for the pure reason to do something for others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that you hit it. It's like, how do we take it from the me and take that M and switch it upside down to we,
Right.
And it goes to, as Desmond Tutu brought forward from the African philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because we are.
That's a powerful statement. So how have you in your work or if you've seen it at all, how have you seen things change in the last 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, or has anything changed at all in the realm of peace, whether it be local, national, or even global? Of course, in the last year, we've had the war in the Middle East, and then, we've had Ukraine pop up in the last 5 years. But in your particular work, even going to the very local level to the global level, has anything changed for you in how you're teaching or working or with the philosophy of it or anything like that you can share?
Well, like I said, it's always changing. And I think of this wonderful peace builder, Nina Meyerhoff, who when Russia invaded the Ukraine, created a safe place for family, particularly children, outside of the Ukraine in Auschwitz, where that was, near there, where families could come, children could be. She raised money so that there could be computers, so that the kids could start to have, not everybody got there, of course.
Right.
But, here was an activity that somebody was doing. It wasn't getting, the media recognition that it deserves, but it was making a difference. And there are so many organizations that are out there that are saying, this needs to be changed. We need to address these issues. And so they start to actually do that.
Yeah.
I do see that there's a momentum among peace builders to work and work and work and to grow. I've just become part of an organization called GPEN, which is Global Peace Education Network, and we're in conjunction with UNESCO.
Mhm.
And that has grown out of a need to create more peace education connections with
Right.
people around the world, so
Right.
that we can start to cross-pollinate and help one another in a lot more ways and be aware of what it is that's happening. And yes, policy gets the attention, but there's so much other work that's going on all the time. Do we feel a sense of despair in this? Yes.
Mhm.
And there's one of the skills is the inner will is to attack forces of evil, not the person doing evil.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we need to differentiate that.
How do
Even
you
without
do that?
practice,
Okay.
it's practice. And
Right.
it's noticing we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes.
Right.
We're going to be wrong. We're going to fail. We're going to get afraid. We're going to have to just go go inside and pull the covers over our heads sometimes. That we need that. Go out, take a walk in the woods, do whatever it is that you need. But when you come back out, recognize that what are the forces of evil? What are the things that are creating the disparities, Mary, that you brought forward? Why is that? Why is it that people do not have a safe place to live, food on their table, and all children are getting a fair education? Basic human rights, why are those not being met?
Right.
I have the answer. No, I have a suggestion. I feel like it's a scarcity mentality, that it's a zero-sum game, that if you have more, I'm going to have less. And I don't know how we got to that place where we don't see abundance, we see scarcity. I don't know whether it's a deterioration of the spiritual, of economic systems. I don't know. But I do think it has something to do with if you get something, I'm going to lose something, and I need to protect what I have. I just put that out there as an amateur.
No, as a real human being living in the world and observing and feeling these things.
I'm digesting that. That's there's a lot there. And when you were saying that, does the deterioration in some communities of family or just community attribute to that too? Is it modern day society? There's so many facets of that, Mary, that just as a novice to this in a way, just pondering that it's weighty.
And isolation and
Yeah.
loneliness.
Yep. And that was exacerbated by the COVID.
Yes.
Misinformation and stories made to appeal to our baser selves and our deepest fears,
Mm-hmm.
and dehumanizing each
Yeah.
other. That's where I think. So I took this course through the Greater Good Science Center. It was a Bridging Differences for university educators, and they really talk about the need to get out of this realm of stereotypes and get into the realm of you and me, and starting with something so benign as that we both like broccoli. Like starting with that as our building block, and then going up, trying to find areas of intersection. And sometimes I feel like that would be monumental if you got a common vegetable with another person sometimes. Not even going into how it's prepared, just
Right.
broccoli. So I found it really interesting to think about how much we dwell in stereotypes, and we're not listening to our stories anymore. And that's where I was wondering whether the stories are me telling you about me, and what what experiences I've had and what influence I've had that have gone into my point of view, so that you can understand that even though I might see the world differently than you, I got there in a very particular way that actually might make sense.
I agree with that. I mean, yes. And what you're tapping into too is the story of how you got there and sharing that. And we need to have more time that we spend with one another where we're actually engaged in that. It's not about us. I mean, we just had this past weekend, my husband and I, we went out, we had dinner with friends, and the people that invited us over have very, very opposing political views to our own. But that did not stop us from sitting at a table, breaking bread together, laughing, talking, finding the ways in which we have a commonality. And so we're neighbors to one another. If they need something, I'm there. If I need something, I know that I can call them, that they will have my back. And that's what builds that sense of community and helps to remove the sense of isolation. You know, we need to be, as adults in the world, we need to be doing a better job.
I just feel like also in this tumultuous time that there's a lack of patience and open-mindedness for, okay, you and I may be of different minds when it comes to A, B, or C, but why can't we not still sit down and be civil about it and discuss it? Like, I want to understand why you feel this way about A, and you would like to discuss how that, same for me, and how that impacted why I have this viewpoint on B and C as a result of that. I just feel like that has lost so much in today's society, and I think is probably a hindrance to peace, if you will. But I think it's just closed-mindedness and also lack of patience, which I think is very sad. And like Mary and I discuss things all the time, and we may be on opposing sides, but we're still open-minded enough to, I want to understand, because I have my viewpoint, but I could still grow and learn. And so tell me your viewpoint. What are the, building blocks to get you to there? Why can't we discuss like as a nation, as a community? I feel like it's just so important if we could do that more often.
Absolutely. Live in that place of being curious.
Right.
Or as Rachel Carson would say, when you're dealing with a difficult situation, step into that place of wonder. How do we do that? And we are socialized to often believe within our culture that we're right.
Right.
We take these steps to attain this particular standing, whatever that is.
Right.
And that's what we see, what we focus, what we do. But how about if we just kind of just broke that apart and said, let's get out of the individual narrative and start to see it all like we're at a loom and we're creating a tapestry. And this is humanity, and all the threads need to be part of it.
Right.
And it's so much more beautiful when it is.
Exactly. So with that said, specifically, obviously we're just ahead of election season. What would be some of the, not tips, but some of the, advice you could give to bridge differences, to have an open mind or have the patience or have the interest for our listeners and for our communities? What might you give them as building blocks to get, one step closer?
I think the first thing is we take a little moment to center yourself. The days, the news feed is going to be challenging. The numbers are scary, whatever side you're on. And, it's a close race. It's scary. People are worried. And when people, there's this aspect of fear, and I'm sure you've heard this, acronym, fear can be fear everything and run, or face everything and rise. So how do we, whatever it is we're afraid of, how can we rise to be our better selves each day as we, have our coffee, our tea, whatever, we go out into the world? How can we be that person? How can we look at the stereotypes, as Mary is bringing forward, and instantly when we see a flag or a sign or, a bumper sticker or, a button or whatever, we'll have immediate reactions.
Right.
I'm with you. Oh, I'm against you. And so the minute the mind goes to I'm against you, we got to go back to I disagree with some of the fundamental beliefs that you have. You are a human being, part of this tapestry, and part of my job is to find a way to be able to talk with you about this. And sometimes people are not going to be willing to do that. They're not there. And then what I do afterward is I just try to kind of, just kind of send a little love their way. Just send a little love, because it helps to diffuse my anger, which is causing part of the problem. And, maybe if I have that approach, the next time maybe, or the third time, we might be able to have a conversation.
I think what hadn't occurred to me in this context was what you just said. If send a little love, because that diffuses your own, which enables you to approach the next person or maybe the same person. I think that's so powerful. And I think that's something that maybe we don't realize, the power of us taking care of our inner breath, if you will, to then be able to approach the situation again. I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
It's hard. It's going to be hard. We have, with great difficulty, it's a great responsibility, with great challenges, with great responsibility. We can meet if we meet it. And, we meet it with compassion. And I've learned that my goal is not to change somebody's mind, but to make them feel comfortable to talk with me. I want them to be comfortable. I want them to feel, to feel that they have value. I see them as a human being with value.
And I think a lot of people have the misconception in that, especially the loudest voices, in that they think it's their prerogative and their job to change those who don't believe exactly what they believe. And I think that why it's the majority who are now afraid to even take part in the conversation. But that's a good reminder that it's not my job to change your mind, but it's my job to have an open mind and hopefully discuss with you.
And yes, and then to find the things that connect you.
Yeah, exactly.
So it might not be that, but you might love the same sports team.
Or broccoli.
Talk about that.
Broccoli. Once we go to Brussels sprouts, it's a whole different animal.
Oh, come on.
No Brussels sprouts?
Oh, no, I do like them. I've learned to love them. With bacon, of course.
I was going to say with bacon or glaze?
Yeah. That was one of the things that I found interesting in this Bridging Differences. There were two things. One, finding something larger than both of you that you can agree upon, whether it's your love of baseball. And the other was going at it by not going at it.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm kind of making up that wording, but you know how when you have a problem that you think on it so hard and you focus on it so hard and you can't get the answer, but you let it go and you go for a walk.
Okay.
And you're half a mile down the road and it pops in your head. And it's the same thing with trying to bridge a difference, that if you and I might have a really hard time agreeing on something or finding an access point. But if we do an activity together, like bake cookies or knit, that we see each other differently and we're building a relationship, that we're taking the back door in to finding consensus about something. Maybe I'm not being super articulate about it, but letting go of the thing that you disagree on, that you're trying to bridge, and bridge over here, which will impact how this gets bridged.
So
People
some sort
can't
of
see my hand motion. But, anyway, Lisa's nodding, so I hit something.
So some sort of common ground.
Yes. And I think that that's absolutely right. And I think you expressed it beautifully. I was actually thinking of baking and knitting before you mentioned it as that kind of common ground, and and that's really, we're always, no matter what it is. I mean, we can watch, we can watch a sports game and we can see, someone call a foul, and we can all have different, that wasn't, that was, that shouldn't have been. And we would all have different, but we still want to sit there, enjoy each other's company, watch the game. I'm not, so we're not going to always agree. That's not the aim.
Right.
The aim is, can we continue to find the common ground? And can we do so with a sense of an open heart and compassion? And can I care for you? And in caring for, when you start to care for others, then all of a sudden, all that differentiation that you have with people beyond that, a certain border that you've, placed around people, then in time, that I've watched this again and again and again happen in my work. I've watched the prejudice. I've watched the ways in which people have said, no, I can't stand that. And then it will drop, it'll fade. They'll say, oh, I see. And all of a sudden, it's like the world has a new perspective and they can see beyond those limitations. But it takes time.
Right.
It takes trust. And it takes humor. And it takes that finding those places of common ground.
Well, you picked a really hard career, I have to say. But it sounds like you're still hopeful that these moments, these small moments of watching some prejudice fade a bit, keeps you going.
It does. It feeds me. It just gives me, it excites me. It gives me hope. That's in my adrenaline. Give me a little hope and you'll start to see me, it's like, and it's there. And I'm always surprised, and people always surprise and delight me. And yeah, I love it.
Well, just to sum up, because we're at the end of our time already, what is one small piece of peace that you would share with people to help them in their own journey?
The advice would be to remember this, that love needs action, that trust needs proof, and peace is possible. And don't ever, ever give up.
Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your work and your thoughts with us today. I'm really grateful.
Oh, thank you, Marian Thoren. Thank you for being willing to go into this mud with me.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, it's exhausting, but interesting and fun.
Enlightening too.
It's beautiful. I thank you for that.
Well, Thoren, what do you think about peace? And Lisa?
I'm a huge fan of both.
Yes. How can you not?
Seriously, that was, as we said, that was a very different episode for us, a very different type of guest and topic, but so important, and enjoyable too, as well as poignant and timely. The thing that she said at the very end, and I wrote it down while she was actually saying it, love needs action, trust needs proof, and peace is possible, I think is such an important message. And there were times in there, and for those who listened, at times I made 2 or 3 references where I just literally stopped and I was like, wow, that's hitting me. I don't even have words for it, but the meaning of what she was saying and the depth of it, but the action that can be taken in those moments, there's so much we can do at such, doing simple steps to reach this bigger global impact. So I think she made peace attainable. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, if you will. What about you?
I, first of all, love how she bridges intellect and action. She's not just sitting writing about peace in an ivory tower. She is in the trenches. She's working with people, and she's unafraid to pursue it from multiple avenues, through the arts, through her workshops, through her conversations. I really admire that. I also admire that she brings a sense of humor with it, a sense of joy, and isn't bogged down by the enormity of the task that she's undertaken, that she finds gratitude and victory, if you will, in the smallest places, and movement, and understands how gradual her work is. And I think that was a glimpse that I enjoyed getting into the work that she does.
it just also went to show that we often get so bogged down in our everyday, but that we too can make a difference. And in today in today's times and society and world, I think it's more poignant than ever to remember that and to do something. And like she said, one of the things that will stay with me is that even if we're discussing something and we can't agree on it, or someone just won't hear a different opinion or have a conversation, that in our hearts we send them love, because that opens it up, this frees us from the negativity, if you will, or whatever it may be, and kind of opens us up for the next person, or to have that conversation again with that same person. But I think that's something that is probably my biggest takeaway from the conversation with her, because I feel like that's so important, because that has the impact on us to then look outward again. And it all
Right.
starts from within. So I think that kind of goes back to how she started the conversation in the very beginning about centering ourselves and taking a breath and being connected.
Yeah. And that you have the efficacy, you are empowered to
Mhm.
change the world in your own small
Exactly.
sphere.
Exactly.
Whether it's the family, your street, the community, and building outward from there. So like the butterfly's wings.
Exactly. And that you're doing it not for selfish reasons or for publicity for yourself or self-importance, but because it's genuinely, you want to make a difference, and it's not for press. It's not for clicks. I think that's also very important to remember, and that it's because then it's genuine. For me, those are the most poignant things. And, that it made me stop literally and think, and I'm still thinking about that.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed meeting Lisa. All right, till the next one.
Next one. See you later. This episode is proudly sponsored by Main Street Magazine.